Okay, so we've seen our unit circle before, but here, now notice my unit circle would be the guy right here. Okay, that would be the 1 unit out, right? So now what we're looking at is a polar graph where we have our units, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, we can go all the way out. So a polar coordinate is r theta. Think about r as being the radius of your circle, right? And theta is then the angle that we're looking for. So let's see, we're not going to do these in the order they occur. Let's look at this point first, because it's kind of the most straightforward. So that's the point 2, 5 pi over 4. So what I'm going to do is find the angle 5 pi over 4. He's right there, right? Everybody see where he is? There's 5 pi over 4. And then I want to go out 2 units on that line. So that is the point 2, 5 pi over 4. Then let's look at this guy, the 4, negative 7 pi over 4. So first I've got to find negative 7 pi over 4. So kind of a trick to doing that is positive 7 pi over 4 is here, right? So negative 7 pi over 4 is going to be opposite that. So he's going to be here, right? Notice they both have a reference angle of pi over 4. And so if I want the ordered pair 4, negative 7 pi over 4, I need to be on the pi over 4 line 4 bands out. So now let's talk about what happens when our r is negative. So I said a minute ago for you to think about r as being the radius, right? Well, a radius can't be negative, right? So what I want you to think about when you have a negative r is we've got to go 180 degrees in the opposite direction. So what does that mean? Let's look at negative 5 pi over 6. So the first thing I'm going to do is find 5 pi over 6. Here it is, right? So a positive 5 would be 5 bands out. But that would be if that was a positive 5 pi over 6. Since it's a negative 5, we've got to go in the opposite direction. So it's still on that same line that's 5 pi over 6, but it's on the other side of the origin. Okay? Looking at negative 6, negative pi over 3. The first thing we need to do is find negative pi over 3. So that would have a reference angle of pi over 3, right? So here is my negative pi over 3, excuse me. And I want negative 6 is my r value. So I'm going to follow that line across the other side of the origin, and I'll be right, let's see, 6, 5, there. How about I put it on the dot? So the negative just moves it to the other side of the origin. Okay, let's look here. I have 11 pi over 6. So first I'm going to find 11 pi over 6, which is right here, and I want 2. So when they're both positive, all is easy, right? Then let's look at negative 5, negative 2 pi over 3. So again, to kind of an easy way to find that is if this is positive 2 pi over 3, right? Negative 2 pi over 3 is going to be opposite that, right? And they both have a pi over 3 reference angle. And then I want an R value of negative 5. So I'm going to follow my angle there, that's 4 pi over 3 now, over the origin and across to 5. Making sense? Negative 6, negative 3 pi over 2. So again, I think you know that negative 3 pi over 2 is the same as pi over 2. But if you think about it, we could say, okay, here's positive 3 pi over 2, right? So the negative of it is just going to be opposite, right? It's going to be flipped up there. I want an R value of negative 6. So that means I'm not going to be here, right? That's a positive 6. I need to follow that line to the other side of the origin, and there it is. And the last one then is another easy one. We have 5 pi over 6. So we are going to have, let's see, here's 5 pi over 6, and we just want 5. So since it's positive, we're just counting 5 bands up. So looking at some other options here, there are 4 different ways to name each point, okay? Every point can be named 4 different ways, depending on the combination of R being positive or negative and theta being positive or negative. So in ALEKS, I believe it'll just ask you to give it another name, or come up with name it how it's positive R, negative theta or something. We're going to go ahead and come up with the other 3 ways to name each of these points that we're going to look at. All right, so first, let's graph this guy. Okay, so he's negative pi over 3. Well, positive pi over 3 would be here. So here's negative pi over 3, right? It's opposite. It has a reference angle of pi over 3. And they want the R to be a negative 5, so I'm going across the origin and 5 bands up. So now we're going to come up with some other ways to name it. We've already got the negative R, negative theta. The easiest one is the positive R and the positive theta. So if we look at 2 pi over 3 as being our R, that would be a positive R, right? And that R is 5, right? So we would have 5, 2 pi over 3. So we have positive R, positive theta, and they gave us negative R, negative theta. Let's look at R, negative theta. So if I want to do R, negative theta, I know my R is going to be 5. But what negative angle will get me to 2 pi over 3? I'm going to do it kind of the same way I did before, and look opposite would be 4 pi over 3, right? So if I did negative 4 pi over 3, that would put me at 2 pi over 3. So we have negative R, negative theta, positive for both, and then we have positive R, negative theta. Now we need negative R, positive theta, right? So again, we're trying to get to the orange dot, right? so let's think about what we would need to do for the 5 to be a negative 5. So if that's a negative 5, that means that it would start over here, right? And I would be going 180 degrees from the purple, right? That would be a positive 5 if I was going to the purple dot. If I want to get to the orange dot, it's a negative 5. So that angle is positive 5 pi over 3. Again, Alex doesn't ask you for all of the different ways. It'll ask you for either something specific or name it a different way or name it 2 different ways or something like that. All right, so let's look at 6 negative 11 pi over 6. All right, so positive 11 pi over 6 is here, right? So negative is just going to flip it up, and it's right here, right? Both of those have a pi over 6 reference angle, right? Think about yours go in the opposite direction. And my R value is 6. So the red dot is what we are trying to rename. We can pretty easily rename it positive, positive, right? Because that would be a positive 6 pi over 6. Now let's think about negative. So if my R is negative, that means that we would be over here, right, where the orange is, and then the negative would pull it to the red. So we've got to think about what those angles would be. So the positive angle is 7 pi over 6, right? We see it there. So we would have negative 6, 7 pi over 6. And then we want to do negative, negative. So again, I know this is a negative 6. And I want to know what negative angle gets me here. Well, if that's a positive 7 pi over 6, it's a negative 5 pi over 6, right? They both have a pi over 6 reference angle. So negative 6, negative 5 pi over 6. Let's look at a couple more. So positive 2, negative 5 pi over 4. Well, positive 5 pi over 4 is here, right? So negative is going to be up here. And our R value is a positive 2, so we're just going out 2. So that's the point they've given us. So that's what we did a second ago, was just plotting them. So now we're going to find out other ways to name it. The easiest one is positive, positive, right? So it's a positive 2, 3 pi over 4. Now we want to think about the negatives, right? So if R is negative, it would start where the orange dot is, right? Kind of how we would think about it, and then it would go 180, go across the origin. So that means we are looking at 7 pi over 4 now. So we could rewrite it as, if R is negative 2, 7 pi over 4. Because we would go to 7 pi over 4, and then our R would go on the other side of the origin. And then we need one where the R is negative and the theta is negative. So if this is positive 7 pi over 4, that's the same thing as negative pi over 4, right? They both have a pi over 4 reference angle. Just think about their distance from the horizontal axis. So we would have negative 2, negative pi over 4. And looking at the last one, we have 3 pi over 2, negative 4. So we know where 3 pi over 2 is. And if we're doing negative 4, we want to be 4 units on the other side of the origin. Looking at a different way to name it, pretty easily, I think, we can see that this could be 4 pi over 2. So we've got both of the positive angles there. Now we need to look at the negative angles and a negative r, right? So let's see. We want let's make it a positive 4. So what would the negative angle be? If that's a positive pi over 2, I could do a negative 3 pi over 2. And then thinking about the negative r, we know that would be a negative 4. And so he would have to be on this guy. Well, I guess I could make that a darker color there, or a thicker line. There, I would be on this purple dot, right? Because then the negative r would flip it up to the red. And so that would be a negative pi over 2. Again, you're not going to be asked to name it all 4 different ways or all 3 different ways. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 in there.